Personal Power, Volume 1, Chapter 6, The Twin Manifestations. In the preceding section of this book, we have shown you that it is impossible for the human mind to understand just what the ultimate principle of power in itself, is in its essential nature and being. Likewise, we have shown you just how it is possible for us to know that there is such power at all. Just as you have seen that when you consider the I am I center of being within yourself, you must rest content with the inevitable, invariable, and infallible report of self-consciousness, that I am I. So you find that you must rest content with the inevitable, invariable, and infallible report of your reason that power, the ultimate principle of all power, is and must be present and in being. In both cases, you are confronted with a final mystery, not two final mysteries, however, but the two aspects of the one final mystery. But likewise, just as you find it possible to discover just how the I am I manifests and expresses itself in your personal activities, so you may discover just how power manifests and expresses itself in the activities of the cosmos, and just how you may draw upon power for personal power to be manifested and expressed in your personal activities. And after all, that is the main point of practical instruction designed to aid and assist you in your life activities in this very practical world of very practical things. The pragmatic philosophy needed by you in your practical life here and now in this very practical world properly concerns itself with the just how questions and leaves the just why insoluble problems for those who enjoy the Sisyphean task of striving like the blind man in the dark room seeking to find the black cat, which isn't there. Sisyphus, you may remember, was that unfortunate character of ancient mythology who was subjected to eternal punishment in Tartarus, his task consisting of the eternal rolling of a huge stone to the top of a high mountain, the stone constantly recoiling, and thus rendering his task incessant, unceasing, and unending, without possible accomplishment. In considering what observation, experiment, and reason teach us concerning just how power proceeds to manifest its strength and energy in the activities of the cosmos, let us begin by quoting to you an ancient Oriental fable devised by the earliest teachers to illustrate the cosmic activities as well as the human activities along the lines of personal power. By carefully grasping the principles set forth in this old fable, and by fixing them in your mind, you will have ever before you a most useful and practical diagram of the methods employed by power, and which also are to be followed in your manifestation and expression of personal power. Both the personal power you now possess, as well as the cultivated, developed, and trained personal power which you will acquire by applying the principles and methods embodied in the present instruction. The ancient fable, which has been told by teacher to pupil in Oriental lands for many thousands of years, proceeds as follows. Once upon a time, there dwelt in a vast forest two individuals, each of whom had been particularly blessed by the gods in certain ways, yet equally deprived of certain other particular blessings. Both of these individuals were giants in power, yet their power was so limited in certain directions that their lack was as great as was their possession. The first of these forest dwellers was a physical giant, filled with vigor and strength and animated with a strong desire, longing and craving to move about, travel, and to play an important part in the world of men. But alas, he had been born blind and could find his way about the forest only by clumsily groping and feeling his way, stumbling along from tree to tree, always traveling in circles and never getting anywhere. He was never able to emerge from the forest and to reach the world of men. The name of this giant was Volition, which means the power of willing. The second of the forest dwellers was a mental giant possessed of wonderful powers of observation and perception, good judgment and discernment, able to reason and to plan, to imagine and invent. But alas, he had been born with withered legs and paralyzed arms, and was unable to travel around and about by means of his own powers of locomotion. or to employ his arms in any natural activities. His great mental powers went to waste by reason of his physical deficiencies. In this way, he was quite as helpless as the physical giant. The name of this second giant was ideation, which means the power of thinking. And so, these two great giants, one a physical giant, the other a mental giant, dwelt apart from each other in the great forest, each being dependent upon friendly neighbors for his food and raiment, each living the life of a helpless beggar, and each unable to fulfill that destiny for which his great powers would seem to have fitted him. In neither existed that combination of seeing and doing, that necessary coordination of essential powers, yet each had what the other lacked, and each lacked what the other possessed. In each was power going to waste, power unable to express and manifest itself. One day, the blind giant, groping and stumbling around in a circle, chanced to come near to the paralyzed giant. The latter called loudly to the former and directed his steps to where the latter sat helpless. The two, meeting for the first time, conversed earnestly. Before long, a strong friendship was established between them. The bond of mutual sympathy and of mutual need and lack served to unite them in a mutual understanding and comradeship. Then there flashed into the mind of ideation a brilliant thought. He saw at once in a flash of intuitive insight how the two giants might form a most advantageous partnership to which each might contribute his own particular powers, the powers which the other lacked. Volition would contribute the body and physical strength, his strong body, strong legs, and strong arms. Ideation would contribute his strong sight, strong powers of observation and perception, strong powers of discrimination and judgment, strong powers of imagination, reasoning, and invention. The combination would be perfect, said ideation, and volition enthusiastically embraced the opportunity thus afforded him. And so, volition, the blind giant, lifted up ideation, the paralyzed giant, high on his shoulders, and the pair started forth through the forest toward the world of men, guided by the keen eyes and brain of ideation and carried by the sturdy legs and body of volition. The pair traveled far and fared well. The eyes of ideation saw clearly and keenly, and his mind not only pointed out the best paths and roads to travel, but also planned well their journey. He mapped out new scenes of travel and devised the best routes, and he discovered the places at which food and shelter were obtainable. He found work to be performed by volition, and he told him how to do it efficiently. In this way, the pair supported themselves ably under the direction of the keen-sighted and keen-witted ideation. On the other hand, volition, the blind giant with his superb physical strength, carried the pair easily and rapidly over the road and performed the physical work which served to support the pair and to accomplish their joint purpose. He did his work well, the work which such a strong, vigorous giant might be expected to do. Guided by ideation, he no longer wasted time and effort in traveling about and in performing his tasks. His sturdy body, legs, and arms had found an equally strong pair of eyes and a brain capable of functioning efficiently. And so, as has been said, the pair traveled far and fared well. The wise Oriental teachers concluded their relation of the fable by the recitation of its moral and application as follows. Here you have the story of nature and of man. Nature in her earlier years was like the blind giant, filled with power and with longing to act, but unable to see its way before it. It stumbled and groped, often traveling around in circles and retracing its steps. Blind nature, though strong of will, was unable to perform its desired tasks as it wished to do. It made mistakes, it failed, it went round and round, ever trying to find a way, often proceeding into the blind alleys of the forest only to be forced to retrace its steps. It could not see. It often acted like a sleepwalker with a strong purpose but lacking a definite direction. Only when it evolved its ideative powers and coordinated these with its blind will Was it able to proceed with intelligence and indefinite directions? This is the story of nature, my sons. Thus does it work, thus does it proceed, thus does it create and accomplish. Then the sages continued, and like unto it is the story of man. In each man, there is the blind giant of will, full of energy and vigor, filled with the burning desire and urge to express and to manifest its powers of action, yet of itself capable merely of stumbling and blundering, groping and feeling its way, and usually traveling in circles. Likewise, in every man there is found the crippled and paralyzed thought, keen-eyed and keen-witted, resourceful, observing, discerning, planning, inventing, but of itself incapable of moving about and of performing efficient work. Only when human thought mounts the shoulder of human will and points out the way, the road, and the direction, and only when human will permits and submits itself to this direction and guidance, and consents to use its strong body, strong legs, and strong arms to pursue the path and to perform the work so pointed out to it by human thought, only when this cooperative partnership is formed in the mind of man and proceeds to manifest and express its combined and coordinated powers, only then do the united pair, the two in one, become efficient, useful, and capable of effective and efficient expression and manifestation. This is the story of man, my sons. Thus does he work, thus does he proceed, thus does he create and accomplish. Postponing for the moment the application of this principle to the personal power of man, we would say that many of the brightest minds of philosophy have arrived at a similar conclusion concerning the character of nature's activities. But alas, many of them saw only one side of the story and ignored the other. Some, like Schopenhauer, saw only the will aspect and sought to explain thought as an evolution of will, a product of the activities of blind will in nature. Others, certain of the great idealists, saw only the thought aspect and sought to explain will as a product of evolved thought. Each of these schools of philosophy explained matters quite satisfactorily up to a certain point, but each failed to perceive the dual aspect of nature's activities, the respective aspects of will and thought, the twin manifestations, combined and coordinated as equal partners, each impotent without the other. Later, philosophers, however, have seen the truth embodied in the ancient Oriental fable and have sought to build systems of philosophy upon it. And the tendency is now in that direction. And this is well, for it is the only way. Schopenhauer postulated a cosmic blind will as the ultimate principle of power and explained the universe in its terms. Others followed him along these lines with various modifications. Schopenhauer said, will is the innermost essence, the kernel of every living thing, and of the totality of existence. Others held similarly, defining will as desire with the power to act, or power with the desire to act. Wundt said, the universe as perceived by us is the outer wrapper or sheath behind which is hidden a spiritual creative activity, a striving, feeling, sensing, like that which we experience in ourselves, the active principle of which is conation or impulse, tendency, desire, and will. In this connection, you will recall the statement of Nicholas Murray Butler, previously quoted in this book, in which he says, the dominant tendency in philosophy, powerfully supported by the results of scientific knowing, is that which sees totality as energy, which is will. On the other hand, we find the idealists holding that the ultimate principle is ideation or ideative power, the universe being a purely ideative creation, a drama, a mental picture, a story, or perhaps even a daydream or actual dream of a universal ideative power. The idealists hold that the universe and everything in it is but an idea or series of ideas in the ideative mind of a supreme ideator. Idealism, in this sense, is defined in the reference books as the philosophical doctrine which holds that the world is an idea and which teaches that material objects have no real existence and that we have no rational grounds for believing in the reality of anything in the cosmos but ideas and their relations. A variation of this philosophy is that which holds that ideal forms existing eternally constitute reality. These have the power and ability to manifest and express outward semblances of themselves, which, however, usually appear more or less distorted or imperfect. Von Hartmann came quite near to the combination of volition and ideation in some portions of his philosophy of the unconscious. He said, "No one can will without willing this and that. Only through a definite direction does the will obtain the possibility of expression." So in his philosophy, he combined cosmic will and cosmic idea, the two combined forming the cosmic principle. He compared the two aspects of his cosmic principle to the color and the fragrance of the rose, neither of which contradict or oppose each other, or again, with the two poles of a magnet, with opposite qualities on which relation and correlation the cosmic activities depend. A modern psychologist says, will is called out by ideas. It goes out only in response to ideas. And an idea which is the object of will is transformed into a motive of voluntary action. So you see, the conception of the dual aspect or twin manifestation is coming into prominence as it was bound to do in time. If you will observe the process and activities of nature, you will see everywhere the evidences of volition and ideation, the blind will moving into activity under the direction and impulse of thought. The idea is the form or pattern, which the will is always endeavoring to manifest and express into objective and material existence. If you wish a working philosophy of the ways and manner in which nature proceeds, and by which her creative activities seem to be accomplished, you can do no better than to employ, at least tentatively, the general idea of these philosophies, which include the conception of the coordination and correlation of will and thought, of volition and ideation, as illustrated in the ancient Oriental fable. By this, however, we do not mean to indicate that we believe that power, the cosmic ultimate power, is in itself merely volition and ideation. On the contrary, we rest on our previous statement that all we can say of the essential nature of power is simply that it is. It must be eternal, uncaused, and self-existent. All that we mean to imply concerning cosmic volition and cosmic ideation is that these appear to constitute the twin manifestation of power in the cosmos and seem to be the special and particular instruments or machinery by means of which power accomplishes its creative expression and manifestation in the cosmos. Be sure that you understand us correctly in this distinction, for the differentiation is an important one. It is as illogical to identify power with its instruments and machinery as it is to identify the I am I, or master self, with its own particular instruments and machinery. Personal power in man, being part of the general manifestation and expression of power in the cosmos, for there is no other power in which it may be the expression and manifestation, must come under the general rule of the expression and manifestation of power in the cosmos. That is to say, it must be governed by the twin manifestation along the lines of volition and ideation, of will and thought. Investigation and observation, aided by actual experiment, prove this to be the case, as might be expected. The I am I, or master self, being a focalized center of presence and power created by power in its cosmic manifestation, naturally proceeds to express and manifest itself in activity, just as does power manifest and express itself in its greater activities, i.e., by employing the instruments and machinery of volition and ideation. All of man's activities are perceived to proceed under this rule. In this connection, however, you must not overlook the fact that the mental and physical activities of man proceed along the lines of subconscious processes as well as along those of the ordinary consciousness. There is subconscious will and subconscious thought, as well as conscious will and conscious thought. In fact, a very large percentage of man's will activities and thought activities proceed on the subconscious planes or levels of his being. Man's physical growth and the processes of his physical organism proceed most entirely along the lines of subconscious activity. There is ever present the will pressing forward to accomplish its work of growth, nutrition, repair, elimination, etc. There is also ever present ideation, furnishing the mental pattern or design which will proceeds to objectify and materialize. The idea of the oak tree is implicit in the germ within the acorn, and the willpower in the acorn and in the growing tree ever presses forward to make that ideal real, to objectify and materialize the ideal form. Ideation builds the inner form, and will strives to materialize into outer form that which first existed in ideal form. This is as true of the human life as that of the oak, and of all forms of life in nature. It is manifested equally and as truly in the formation of the crystals as it is in living things. In every natural activity in which things and events are perceived to move according to law and order, and apparently toward a certain pattern, design, or plan, there exists first the ideal or inner form around which the outer or material form or movement builds itself. One who carefully observes nature's processes cannot escape this conviction. Then, viewing man's mental activities and processes, we perceive the same dual principle in action. Man uses his will in order to fasten his attention upon anything. He uses his will when he strives to think out anything, when he tries to bring back an image from memory, when he tries to imagine or invent anything. Even in his feeling states, the will is involved along subconscious lines, and likewise, there is always present the mental pattern of ideation. Will goes forth only in response to some idea. If ideas were shut out of the consciousness of man, then he would feel nothing in the way of emotion, would desire nothing, and would not act to accomplish anything whatsoever. If you wish to arouse the feelings or emotion of a man, you have but to present to him the appropriate ideas calling for those feelings and emotions. If you wish to arouse him to will activity, you have but to supply him with appropriate ideas calling forth such action. Very few persons understand the dynamic force of idea. To them, an idea is merely an intangible something in the mind, having but little, if anything, to do with actual effort or activity. But the psychologists know and teach that ideation, by reason of its pulling power, exercised over the will, is one of the most active elements of all human action. Without ideation, there would be no will action. With heightened ideation, the will action is enormously increased in power and efficiency. Practical psychologists now teach their students that it is possible to arouse, strengthen, and stimulate desire and will by repeatedly and constantly presenting to them the strong, clear, and definite ideas of the things sought to be accomplished, objectified, or materialized. They likewise teach that one may restrain, restrict, or inhibit the activities of desire and will by resolutely withdrawing the attention from the idea in question, or else by directing the attention to an idea of an exactly opposite nature and character. Professor Halleck, the eminent psychologist, says an idea always has a motor element, however obscure. In other words, an idea is a practically incipient motor action. A motor action, unless restrained, tends to go out immediately in definite action. It is a matter of dispute whether or not all that is necessary in voluntary effort has not been achieved when the mind has been kept filled with the idea until action results as a natural consequence. In order to act in the direction of one idea in preference to another, we must first dismiss the one and voluntarily attend to the other. The motor force thus developed in connection with the dominant idea lies at the bottom of every higher active will. During the last quarter century, or perhaps longer, there has been a great revival of interest in the subject of thought force, mind power, or similar general conceptions involving the idea of the use of thought in the direction of bringing about desirable conditions of physical health and strength, prosperity, happiness, and the general welfare of the individual. Under all of the many theories seeking to express the essential spirit of this line of thought, as many call it, and back of the various names, terms, and titles employed to indicate and to designate the same, there will be found the fundamental and basic idea and conception of the tendency of thought or idea to manifest itself in action or in objective form in reality. The kernel of the conception is that of the power of the ideal to become real. Thousands of persons all over the world have sought to demonstrate the power to create or to improve their environment, circumstance, health, success, and ability by means of right thinking. Many have fully demonstrated their ability to create, or at least to improve to a great extent, their own environment, to control circumstances and determine their own destiny by the power of thought. They have proceeded upon the general principles expressed in the biblical adage, as a man thinketh, so is he. And in the equally ancient Buddhistic adage, we are that which we have thought. Wrong thinking is held by them to produce undesirable results and effects, while right thinking is held to produce desirable effects and results. The general conception may be expressed in the aphorism, ideas tend to reproduce themselves in external form and effects. The ideal pattern tends to build around itself an objective material reality. In most of these teachings, however, the element of idea or thought has been most strongly emphasized, overemphasized in some cases, many have thought, while at the same time, the element of will has been underemphasized. In fact, this last element, that of will, has been practically neglected in some cases, and in others, even denounced as evil by some who prefer explaining the subject to the terms of quasi-religious transcendentalism. But it is now being perceived by many of the most careful thinkers along these lines that a failure to include the power of will in connection with the power of thought results in depriving the individual of one half of his mental creative power. The effect to exclude will from association with idea is akin to trying to assert the existence of a magnet with only one pole. As a matter of fact, all the results obtained through the power of thought have been in part due to the correlated and coordinated power of will, though the persons obtaining these results have not been aware of this fact. Ideation without volition, thought without will, is but the paralyzed, keen-sighted giant of the fable who can do nothing of himself, but who requires the strong body, strong arms, and sturdy legs of the blind giant before effective results may be obtained. But at the same time, we must ever remember that it is equally true that the blind giant of will cannot proceed intelligently or effectively until he has raised the paralyzed, keen-sighted ideation to his shoulders. In this union alone is there the real strength of that which is called mind power, thought force, or thought power. Of these two combined, coordinated, and correlated mental elements, may it be said, united they stand, divided they fall. To the many persons who are earnestly seeking to manifest thought in action, objective form, and material results, but who, while obtaining results sufficiently satisfactory to justify them in asserting that there is something in it, still feel that they have somehow, some way not quite got hold of it. The idea of the correlation and coordination of ideation and volition, thought and will, the partnership of the two giants, will come as a welcome revelation. Many such persons, once this idea has been presented to them, will recognize its truth by reason of their own experience. They will realize that they have at last discovered the secret of personal power, and they will then proceed to a greater and fuller manifestation of that power than has heretofore been possible to them in their one-sided view of the principle involved. On the other hand, there are many who have been striving for success by means of the application of willpower alone. But in many cases, this method has failed to attain the desired end. Such persons are often found wandering around aimlessly, traveling around and around in circles, like the blind giant, ever moving, but never getting anywhere. They feel strong desire and strong will stirring within them, but they do not know in what direction to apply these forces. They want to move and to act, but they do not know where to move or in which direction to act. They are like the squirrel in the cage, constantly on the move, but never making a step of real progress. It should require no argument to convince one that without a pattern or mold, mental or physical, it is impossible to create anything. Idea is a mental image, form, pattern, or mold, which is followed by will when it exercises its motive power in creative activity and effort. This being seen, how can anyone reasonably expect to create environment, conditions, or circumstances unless he first mentally creates the idea, image, pattern, or mold, the type or form of that which he wishes to create in the objective material world? Likewise, it should require no argument to prove that the clearer, the stronger, and the more complete the mental pattern, mold, or image, idea in short, really is, then the better, the more efficient, and the more complete will be the materialization of that idea. Just as in nature, every process of materialization has been preceded by an idealization. So in man, every achievement in the direction of materialization, all of his creative work and results, has been preceded by his idealization, the image formed in the mind by ideation. This being so, every intelligent person must see that if one wishes to attain success in any creative undertaking, he should first strive to idealize and create a clear, strong, definite mental picture, pattern, or design of that which he wishes to materialize in objective form. Successful men, indeed, have always followed this method, though they may not have understood the psychology underlying their action, nor the great cosmic principle involved in it. Many failures in life are due directly or indirectly to a failure to understand and apply this principle. Those who hold to the teachings of the new metaphysical movement, under some of its many names, concerning the power of thought and the power of mind, will find in the ideas advanced in this book not a contradiction of their own beliefs and convictions, but rather an addition to them and an explanation of them. All that they now believe concerning the power of thought and its manifestations, this book also holds to be true in principle, perhaps even more strongly and with greater certainty than do they themselves. But this book strives to lift the conception of dynamic thought from the realm of shadowy unreality and ghostly being to that of a living, real, acting, striving, creative power, the body of which is volition, will, and the mind of which is ideation, thought. We ask you boldly to face this truth, to recognize, realize, and to manifest the twin giants of personal power, in whose being vibrates the energy, force, and power of the ultimate principles of power. Those whom power hath put together, let no man put asunder. In fact, no man can put them asunder if he would manifest personal power efficiently. For they are not two separate and distinct things, but rather the two poles or aspects of the same thing. Let us now proceed to the consideration of the practical methods whereby the principles which have been considered, described, and explained may be manifested efficiently in actual effort in your life work. It is said that the proof of the pudding is in the eating. So let us proceed to the table upon which the feast of good things is spread.